All right, how you guys doing? I'm Joe. I'm a heroin addict, amongst other things. First I'd like to say that it's great to be able to come home and visit my hometown, visit my family, and always be able to come here to the Recovery Center. I attend meetings within the recovery community, whether it's here, like regular mainstream AA, the young people's AA, all those fellowships that came before us. I don't really want to share too much about my experience with drugs and alcohol. I certainly qualify. I've had many failed attempts at getting sober. I really just want to share with you guys what works for me and what's allowed me to live a life in recovery. I live down in Long Island now, almost 2 years now. Born and raised here in Saratoga. I have a home group. I have a sponsor. I have commitments. I have commitments in multiple fellowships. I have commitments through our recovery center, like this one here that you guys have. And I don't know. It's I guess I don't really identify as any one substance. I take hold of the spiritual solution in the big book because it tells me that being alcoholic has absolutely nothing to do with the drink, right? So being an addict, alcoholic, whatever you want to call it, has nothing to do with the substance. I like to fill this spiritual malady I have with anything. It doesn't even have to be substances. It doesn't really matter what it is. So my failed attempts at getting sober were a result of just that. I didn't want to take hold of a spiritual solution. I certainly didn't want to read the big book. I certainly didn't want to call a sponsor. I was 19 years old. I walked in the rooms of AA here in Saratoga. There was a bunch of guys older than me. Some people complain about that. I didn't really have a problem with that. I knew that they had something that I wanted. It's just that what I wanted to do was be different. I always thought that I could get sober differently. I always thought I could sustain my recovery differently than everybody else. I always thought I'd be that guy who could get some time clean and sober, hang out with his old friends, go out, have a good time. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to use drugs. And it says, like in the reading, I think you read it, the reading that we read before HA meetings, it says, sometimes we find ourselves, sober for days, months, and even years sometimes without having a permanent solution. And that's my story, I had put together some time clean doing some of the things that were suggested. I got a sponsor, but didn't really call on. I attended a bunch of meetings, sat in a bunch of meetings, but I really had no interest in reading the big book, doing the step work, really trying to figure out what this whole spiritual solution was all about. I even got commitments at times. I came into the rooms many times because I wanted to, because like some people say, they just haven't had enough or haven't been beaten enough or however the heck they say it. I don't really believe in that, because there was many times where I was beaten and broken and I didn't want no more, but I didn't know how to stop using, and I would walk into rooms high. I would walk into rooms and put down whatever substance I was using at that time for a period of time, but something would always happen, and going through this work, finding this spiritual solution, developing a personal relationship with God as I understand Him, which is what the 12 steps is all about. I like to say that it's a dummy's guide to developing a personal relationship with your God, with your Creator. That is what the 12 steps are all about. So that when you get in arguments with family members or friends, or the girlfriend leaves you, or you don't have a job anymore, or you don't have a comfortable living environment or a safe place to live, which many of us early in recovery do not have. That personal relationship that we develop with God allows us, it says in the big book, that we're able to find the joy of living through pressures, in difficult circumstances. When I was younger, these failed attempts at getting sober, I always thought that, like, if I just went to meetings and didn't use, like those old timers in AA say, just don't drink and go to meetings. You'll be fine. It's a lie. It's a lie. It did not work for me. It would work for me for periods of time, for days, months, even years at a time. But when trials and tribulations came my way, when less than ideal circumstances came my way, and this happiness that I had found just not putting substances in my body, and giving the drink and the drug to God as I understood him at the time, but not being willing to give God my finances, my family, my relationships, everything. Wanting to lead my own life in those areas, but God, please relieve me of the drugs and alcohol. You can have that, right? And that's where we fall short. That's where we fall short. Why? Because those other areas of our lives are what matter most. Those are the areas in our lives in which we don't know how to relation with other people. Like, we don't know how to take care of our finances. We don't know how to have healthy relationships, sexual or not. I don't care. Like my relationships with girlfriends were good, bad, indifferent, whatever. But I had shitty relationships all across the board. I messed up plenty of relationships, not just those intimate relationships. And so those are those are our root problem. Not being able to let God be in control in those areas of my life is the reason why I filled my body with substances in the first place. I could never connect that. I could never connect it. Why? Because I didn't have a relationship with God as I understood him. I didn't have a relationship with my Creator, as Bill says in the big book. So that was my hang up, I would get periods of time clean. I would attend meetings, but at some point I'd be like, this meeting sucks. These people suck. This commitment's boring. Don't really want to go to diners or coffee shops anymore. Would rather just, whatever else. I don't know. It wasn't always I'd rather just go use, but it was always just like I'd just rather not be here, because I wasn't spiritually fit, we're promised in this program, if we do these steps, we're promised that we will recover. Like it says right in the title page of the big book that this is the story of how thousands of alcoholics have recovered. It doesn't say in recovery, it doesn't say recovering, it says recovered. The problem with that, again, for me, was that I just went to meetings, took half steps, took half suggestions. I was like a meeting maker. I could do like the whole unity fellowship kind of thing, those sides of the triangle. Couldn't really get to program though. Couldn't get into the book. Kind of like had this underlying like belief in God from my upbringing, but my relationship with God was like this. Like the second step was easier for me because I already believed, kind of that God existed. But for me, it was like, yeah, God exists, but like, he's not my dude. We're not hanging out kind of thing. Like, I don't need him, That's how I lived my life for most of my life. So, I would, be like court mandated, mom mandated, girlfriend mandated, sister mandated, friend mandated, drug dealer mandated a couple times. I had drug dealers tell me, you should go to rehab. Some of you probably have too. That's why you laugh. That's when you really know you have a problem. So all this experience, this is my first step experience, I never really had a problem admitting I knew I was powerless over drugs and alcohol. I was kind of like that person that was like, okay, great, I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol. Now what? And I'm still going to use. So, what are we doing here? Come to find out, this last time, so failed attempts in the rooms, failed attempts at treatment, and, they ask you, they always ask you, when you go to those cute little inpatient or outpatient places, what's your drug of choice? And I would be like, more of anything you have. And the counselors would look at me like I was crazy, They'd be like, no, what's your drug of choice? We got to check off some boxes. And I was like, no, seriously, I don't have a drug of choice. So in a way, I without knowing it, right? I can look back now and say, look, I knew I had a spiritual malady. I knew it didn't matter what I put in my body, I was using to separate myself from less than ideal circumstances in my life, or the restless, irritable, and discontentment that it talks about in the big book. Like, I knew I had a spiritual malady. I just couldn't connect the dots, you know? Like, I just couldn't. Like, I had this awareness that it didn't matter. It didn't matter what it was. Didn't matter what it was. I'm taking anything you have. And again, it didn't have to be substances. So like with all those failed attempts and all the things you hear, you know, you like go to treatment, they want to tell you like why, they want to ask you why you relapsed this time, what are your triggers? I'm like, everything's a trigger. Like the world's a trigger. There's drugs and alcohol everywhere. I know where to get them. Like, I know all the right people. I don't really know how to identify my triggers, you know? Again, another sign that like I had this spiritual hole in me and I was gonna fill it no matter what. And I couldn't connect the dots, you know? Like I would sit there and like try to rack my brain and like, you know, in a circle in a room and try to come up with like my 2 worst triggers. And every time I would like try to write these things down, I feel like everything's a trigger. And how do you avoid them? You can't, right? And that's where the relationship with God comes in. You can't. Like you can't avoid the world. You can't avoid circumstances. You can't avoid relationships. We were created to be in relationship with other people, right? That's what God created us for. And we suck at it, right? And we suck at it, and because we suck at it, we use. Because it's the most simple way and most effective way to deal with that restless, irritable, and discontentment, to deal with, I fucking hate you, I might like you, I don't even know who you are, that kind of thing. Like, I'm just using. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff because I felt safe, you know, getting high. So I moved down to Long Island in August of 2016. I'm 28. I was 28. No, I was 29. I just turned 30 last year in April of 17. So it's 29, you know. Now I'm in recovery for like 10 years, and I've been in and out of the rooms for 10 years. Like I said, I've been court mandated, mom mandated, girlfriend mandated, drug dealer mandated. I tried just not drinking, but using substances. I tried just using substances and not drinking. I tried just using this substance and not that substance, you know. I tried like walking into the rooms, getting sober, not in a relationship. I've tried it like, fuck it, I'm going to get into a relationship anyways. I've tried it like, I don't ever want to talk to another girl again in my entire life. You know, like I tried everything, every which way. Like Joe can really like, really like, I can shift into any gear, you know? Like that's why I'm good at using drugs. Like I'm a good drug addict. Because like I can shift gears real quickly, you know, I can adapt, I can blend in. I can fit in with any ethnic group. I can fit in with any fellowship in the rooms. Because I really identify with it all. So like my hang up was that like I just didn't want to get down with God, you know. I just wasn't willing to give God everything. I just was like, I don't want to use anymore, but like I really like being in control of these other parts of my life, and I feel like I can figure some of this stuff out. I can do all right. Anything I put before God, I lost, always lost. So I moved down to Long Island, and things were different. You know, I developed a personal relationship with God as I understand Him, and it's really taken off from there. I didn't develop that relationship with God, you know, through the 12 steps, but then once I got out of the community residential I was in, which was a faith-based community residential, I took that relationship I had developed with God and I poured it into the recovery community, and I decided to pour it into the 12 steps because I had like this white light moment that like God didn't save me not to pass it on and help others. So I figured the most effective way for me to share my story and to take other people through this work and have it make a difference in the community and leading somebody else through this work and into a life of recovery was to to take the 12 steps that are written out in the Alcoholics Anonymous book, which we use in HA, to take it seriously, right? So I got a sponsor and started reading with them, I started reading in like the first 42 pages. I identify with everything. The first 42 pages of our book is going to tell you that you're fucked. We are fucked, right? And then, but all the while, all through it, right? All through the forwards, the doctor's opinion, Bill's story, more about alcoholism, and there's a solution. Like all those sections of the first 42 pages, it tells us how fucked we are. And it continues to point us towards this solution. So it continues to point us towards get a relationship with God. It doesn't just, like this book, this program doesn't just leave you hanging. It tells you you are powerless, right? I thought the first step was all about surrendering to drugs and alcohol. That's why I only gave God the drugs and alcohol, and I kept messing up in other areas of my life. And before you knew it, the drink and drug are in my hand, because this program is not about admitting we're powerless over the drugs. It's about admitting we're powerless over the first one. That's what the first 42 pages of this book teaches us, that if I put the first one in me, the obsession and compulsion kicks in instantaneously. The disease of addiction, this disease that we all suffer from, this allergy, this illness, it only can manifest itself if we put the first one in them. That's it. That's it. So I didn't have to admit I was powerless over drugs and alcohol. I had to admit that I was powerless over them, and my life became unmanageable, and I had to jump right into a second and third step and believe that God could restore me if I was willing to give him everything. That's really what the third step is about. I mean, we want to take the third step and talk about, giving up our will in our lives. That's a deep, profound statement. Like I always wanted to change that sentence to like giving up my will and in regards to this, and this, and living out God's will in those areas. It's not what this program is about. This program teaches us that if we put God first, we can have all those other things that all those wants and needs that we could desire. So it clicked, right? It clicked. I continued through the book, and then I realized like why the 4th through 9th steps have always been there. Like why Bill and the founders put the action steps in place, because just saying, okay, I'm willing to give my will to God and let him be in control of my life, right? It's not enough, because we have all this stuff that is literally our personal inventory is all this stuff that here's God, here's me, and there's all this stuff in between. There's all this stuff in between. So all those failed attempts at getting sober, although like I was like sober for a period of time, all the while I never realized that I was just adding to my 4th step inventory. Every time I fell short in relationships, every time I fell short with money and with sex and relationships, whatever it was, I was just adding. I was adding to that stuff that was in between me and living a spiritually fit life. So I did a thorough 4th step, and it was like super easy to like write down a list of all people that I couldn't fucking stand, right? When you start your 4th step, it's like real easy. Like I wanted to keep writing, like I hate all of you, and then we write down, so like we write that list and our resentments, our fears, right? Whatever, you get to the last column, right? And then I have to take a look at where I was wrong in that situation. Wow, that last column took a long time. I was like, this 4th step's great. Then I got to the last column of the 4th step, not so great. Like I had to take responsibility for each and every resentment and fear that I had. And all my sexual inventory too. I left that column out. That was a fun column. I got to take responsibility for all this stuff now. And then I got to tell God, someone else, admit to God, myself, and somebody else, So, and then like ask God to remove these things and actually be willing to do it, and then start working on my amends, Like I feel like I'll always be making amends, And then, what happens is like as that stuff just continues to get removed, that stuff that was in between me and God, I was really able to start living out spiritual principles in my life, which is what this program is all about. Get a relationship with God as you understand Him. Make that your most intimate relationship you have in your life over your girlfriend, wife, mom, dad, your children. I don't care who it is. That relationship with God as you understand God, it needs to be the most intimate relationship you have. It's the only way that I could ever go out and do the human worldly relationships correctly. And I still I don't always do them exactly the way I'm supposed to. But if that relationship is the most intimate one in my life, then I got a shot at being a decent dad and being a decent son and being a decent boyfriend and all those things. So I continue to take personal inventory in the 10th step, and if I'm wrong, I immediately do a quick 4th through 9th step. You can always go into action in your life. That's the chapter of the 4th through 9th step called Into Action. You can always, if you mess up, go right into action and clear that stuff up real quick so you don't add to that inventory. Make amends right away. Pray and meditate. And having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, as a result of developing a personal relationship with God as I understand Him, I'm able to practice these spiritual principles in all my affairs. So that doesn't just mean in these rooms. That's also where I fell short, because I was I'm sober, I'm not using, and I go to meetings. Can I get a pat on the back? Can somebody I was why don't people care? This is before having some spiritual experiences that led to a spiritual awakening. That was also part of my failed attempts. Was I only wanted to apply it to the confines of these rooms and the fellowship and that we do, or service that I was doing, and I didn't really want to be patient, tolerant, kind, loving, all those things that we're able to be when we're living spiritually fit. I wasn't willing to be all those things in all areas of my life, But now, like I said when I opened up, all the things that I listed that I do for my recovery and that I do in service to others is a result of having developed a personal relationship that led to some spiritual experiences, that led to a spiritual awakening, that now pour out through me. God did a work in me and now through me to others. So that's why I opened up listing, the service and the different things that I do, because those are the things that got me sober, and those are the things that keep me sober, and those are the things that allow me to walk out this life spiritually fit in all aspects of my life. Our literature also tells us that we are recovered as so long as we stay in fit spiritual condition. So each day I wake up, I am recovered from this, contingent upon putting that relationship first, most intimate first. It's all contingent upon my spiritual fitness. So as I had these experiences, I'm just gonna leave you guys with this real quick, because it's one of my favorite parts of the book. So Bill, after giving us, his whole first step experience, he tells us a whole lot about his history, and then he goes into his 12th step experience, and right when he gets done with it, he tells us that belief in the power of God plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were our essential requirements. And then the most profound thing that he says is that for if an alcoholic, this is right after his 12-step experience too, and this speaks to the 12th step, and this speaks to the depth and weight in which we have to live out these spiritual principles. It's not about just putting down the drink and the drug, having a spiritual experience, having a spiritual awakening, and then becoming satisfied with that. There's a lot in here that tells us that, right in the forward to the second edition, this is in the Roman numerals, this is before you even get to page 1 of the book, it tells us that strenuous work and self-sacrifice towards others is vital. Vital meaning life-giving. I need it to breathe. It's vital for permanent recovery. vital. And the way Bill says it is, for if any alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, so there it is again, he could not, and this is where I got tripped up, right? Because I remember I put down the drugs and alcohol for a period of time many times. If he failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. With me, it was just like that. So, like, that's why when I come home, you know, like on a little vacation to visit my family for the holidays, I always like come to meetings or connect with people I know in the recovery community, because I don't want to just attend meetings. I don't want to just chair a meeting or have a coffee commitment or even like speak at meetings. I want to be self-sacrificial towards others. I want to put God and others before my own selfish wants and desires, because I know full well where, like, if I let Joe be in too much control over any situation, I know what happens, you know, and I don't want too much of me in anything. And that's why, like, I share about the steps when I share. That's why I share about a little bit about the book, because the solution is not in me. This is not like my message, just a message of Alcoholics. It's a message of the 12 steps. It's a message of Alcoholics Anonymous and how we can all be recovered and live a fulfilling, spiritually led life. Thanks for letting me share.
Hi, my name is Elsie and I am an addict.
Hi, Elsie.
Thank you so much for asking me to speak, and I'm really grateful to be here, and did a great job. There's all good points.
I'm glad I went first.
So I've been thinking today, you know, like I get like mesmerized by different parts of the book, or things get stuck in my head. And I was thinking, like, how did I stay here? You know, how did I get through the low points and trials and tribulations? Like what did I do different when it stuck compared to when it didn't stick? So, when I first came to recovery, I would be like, these people would say, you know, if you get the first step, you're never gonna get high again. You're never gonna use again if you get the first step. And I'd be like, okay, I got it. I'm totally powerless and my life is unmanageable, but I keep using. And I couldn't understand why it wasn't working out for me. You know, and it took me like 2 years of going in and out before I was able to understand what they were saying. Like the first 44 pages of the big book, and this is how important a first step experience is. So if you're having difficulty staying here, I have 164 pages to tell you 12 things. I use 44 of them to tell you one thing. So it's like pretty, like 164 pages, but 108 of them actually. 108 of them are really the directions, because then you have the lost chapters. So you have 108 pages. I use 44 of them to tell you one thing, that you're powerless. Like, so it became apparent that the people in this 12-step cult, like, really had a plan to tell me that I was powerless. But the way they were explaining it, I couldn't understand until I came enough where I got it. It's like we all can identify, or most people I speak to can identify, like there came a point where, you know, like it says, you know, I couldn't live with it or without it, you know, like I would say in the morning, I'm definitely not using tonight. I'm not using tonight. Tonight I am not using. You know, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, I'm hanging on the edge of the seat, and I'm like, 9 o'clock, out the door. I don't care who's coming over. I don't care what relationships. I don't care what's going on. I don't care whose money I'm using. I had no power. So it started to be, for a few years, that I just thought I was insane. I just said, who would lie to themselves over and over? And not to mention the lines in the sand, the constant lines in the sand. I'll never do this to use. I'll never do this. I'll never be like that loser. I'll never be like that loser. But it didn't matter, because it just kept pushing along. You know, my boyfriend got shot in the head, still went back to the spot. I got shot in my car, still went back to the spot. You know, I watched my mother have a suicide attempt and was pissed off. Like, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Like, everything I hear in the rooms, I don't know about you all, but I know I am absolute a candidate to do anything. I am capable of murder. There is no doubt in my mind. You know, I will leave anyone behind. And I could not understand that 12 hours before I became that murderous bitch, I was like really not going to use anyone. So for me, like I started.
This was 25 years ago.
Thanks.
This was a long time ago. I just thought I'd put it out there.
So anyway, the whole entire thing is that I did not have any power, but I obviously couldn't put together what the old timers were saying until I started to read the book and I started to come around. Even though I was slipping and sliding, it meant that I didn't have a choice to pick up or not pick up. Like, I didn't understand that part. Like, I did not have a choice to not pick up. Like, I was like a plug of a radio not plugged into the wall. I had no power of choice. It wasn't the drug of choice. It was the drug of no choice. I had no choice. If I did not insert a power greater than myself, I would pick up. I could not understand that until I had a second step experience, till I had a mustard seed of faith, that I came to believe that the power they all were talking about would save me. Till I started to insert that power on a daily basis. Till I started to say, I'll pray. You know, for me, a long time, I prayed to the sun. I would wake up in the morning and I'd see the sun. I'd be like, that's my power. The people in the rooms were my power. I knew I couldn't do it on my own because I had tried so many times. So until I had that first step, surrender, attached to a second step experience, I couldn't get off go. But once I got off go, I started to get momentum. I started to want to have that happy, joyous, free thing. And I seek doing the 12 steps. It took me a long time. You know, I had to go to women's meetings. I couldn't be in co-ed meetings for the beginning of my recovery. That's just me. I needed to be around women because I didn't like them. And I knew they were going to save my ass. So I began to become humble. Humble and humility didn't mean I had to grovel. It just mean I had to admit I didn't know. I didn't know, and these people knew. So, you know, I always remember this part of the spiritual experience. And that's what came into my mind today, which was a powerful tool. It says most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance and belligerence and denial. We have found that no one need have difficulty with the spiritual experience, spiritualness of the program if they have willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness, for these are the essential tools of recovery, and these are indispensable. So they used to say this all the time. They don't say it so much, but how? You know, these are things I grabbed onto like glue in early recovery, that I need to be honest, I need to be open-minded, I needed to be willing. Things I didn't naturally have, you know, but those things I needed to get. Because before I could go through my 12 steps, I needed to have those ingredients. I needed to have acceptance. My sponsor used to have me read acceptance all the time, from the acceptance prayer to the end of the book, because I had no acceptance for anything. Whatever. I had no acceptance at meetings. I had no acceptance at my job. I was on the phone with my sponsor every second. I was one of those type of girls. Hi, do you know this dude said something to me? Blah, blah, blah. And she'd be yeah, just read acceptance. Click. And I'd be but don't you understand? It's way bigger than acceptance. And she would just have me read it. So, you know, these are the tools that I got in early sobriety. But, you know, those were the things that started me up. But a first step experience, the idea that I am like other people must be smashed. I will never be like other people. I'm not going to manage well. That had to be smashed. and then I could start to have a foundation where I could build. And then, going through the 12 steps to a sponsor. I had 20 sponsors in 5 years. Like, seriously. Like, if you're not getting along with your sponsor, get another sponsor. It's not, you're not married to these people. For me, I wanted to get through the steps. And that's what I wanted to do. And I proceeded, I moved around a lot in early sobriety. I changed schedules, but I just kept moving forward. And back then, people really didn't go through the book like they do now, thank God. I'm here to tell you, Alcoholics Anonymous, from my opinion, this is HA. I love HA, just shout it out. But it wasn't like this. It wasn't like it when I came. People say, oh, the good old days. Yeah, the good old days is here's a book, go home and read it by yourself. That was the good old days for me. Today, you have people sit down and read with you, and that's what I do with my girls. But I started to go through the book, and really profound things happened. Like in the third step, it says that in essence, what's happening in the third step experience is I'm saying to God, release me from this merciless disease, and I will let you be my employer. I will do your work well. Like that's the kind of freedom. Like God's saying, my thoughts and my actions, my thoughts and my actions. I'm turning my thoughts and my actions over to God. And if I do his work well, he'll release me from the bondage. And it's like, then, cleaning house, going through my fourth, going through, looking at my side of the street, starting to have a shift, a psychic change. Because after you go through inventory and you see you're selfish, dishonest, fearful, and self-centered, the 4 things that you look at, it's like now all of a sudden I start to think like that all the time. I start to think before I have a resentment. Oh, maybe I really am trying to control this person. Maybe I'm a little selfish right now. Maybe I'm just afraid they're not going to like me anymore. Maybe I'm lying because I want you to like me more than I think you will like me. Like my brain starts to have a psychic change, going through these steps. But, the most important thing also for me was to really ask for help. To realize that the people here, like I hear so many people say, well, I don't want to bother you, or I don't want to lean on you, or I don't want to hassle you. I'm like, listen, you're saving my life. You all who's thinking you're saving somebody by not calling them up to give you a ride, that person could be in their last 90 days. That person could be moving around with 10 years of sobriety and be in their last 90 days. And because you call them up, you save their life. Because people calling me up and people keeping me active saved my life. Because, like Joe said, it says it all through the whole book. Maximum service to God and my fellows. It says that, I have to give away what I have. I love in The Family Afterwards, it talks about the father, his pick struck gold. The gold that it struck was recovery. And that unless he gave away the entire load, which is limitless, he wouldn't be free. So it's like recovery is like that golden pick, the pick of gold. And the only way I can keep it is giving it away. So helping others has been such an amazing part of recovery, but you can't help others, like it says in Vision for You. You can't help others unless you have something to give away. So, I have to stay spiritually fit. For me, spiritual fitness looks like helping others, but it also looks like telling other people, I don't all have it together. Just because I have a lot of 24 hours doesn't mean that I'm not going to fall into those self-centered selfishness and can fly right off the track. There's plenty of people, I'll say it, there's plenty of people, I'll take somebody with 2 years of sobriety on a 12-step call with me instead of somebody with 10 years of sobriety, because they're just so stuck in their ways that they're not growing spiritually. And it talks about two-stepping. It talks about it in our literature. I need to take a nightly review. I just recently have recommitted to doing a nightly review. I got with some Steel on Steel girls, and I'm committed to a nightly review. I'm committed to looking at my day every day. Page 86 is an amazing page of the book. If I had one page to take with me, it would be 85 and 86. I would rip that out and take that with me. It's just keeps you really spiritually fit with those questions. Some other things that have really also helped me is continuing to do service in your group. You know, service at the group, service outside the group, outside the group level really kept me connected in those vital years, you know, like 5 to 10 years of sobriety was really challenging times, you know, like you think 1 to 5, I found a lot of my friends, a lot of people I grew up in recovery, they didn't make it to their 7th anniversary. They didn't make it to their 6th anniversary. You know, I had a pile of 6 and 7 year coins that I couldn't even give away, you know, because you get well here. You know, a friend of mine said it best, you know, we get so beyond our wildest dreams here. Like, you get beyond your wildest dreams and then you forgot where you got your wildest dreams. And then those wildest dreams are everything that you wanted, that you thought you wanted, then you just start complaining about and then you wind up drinking about and getting high about, you know. So I just feel that the best thing I could say to anybody is to stay honest, you know, to stay honest with someone, you know, to stay honest with someone, tell someone what's going on. Realize that, you know, so many times there's been like a split-second moment and I've like reached out to somebody and, you know, and they'll be like, oh, I had the same experience, you know, like I've been through that too. You know, we're all here together. The fellowship is a mighty tool. And, you know, the relationship that you get with others teaches you to have a relationship with everyone outside your life. And with, I can't even say in words, like, the kind of life that I've gotten to live over the last 25 years. I've spent almost my whole life, you know, my whole adult life in recovery, you know, and I've gotten to be a daughter to my family. I've gotten to watch both my parents pass away and been a present part of it. I've gotten to be a part of my community. I've gotten to be a friend, a family member, things that never were happening, that were never going to happen. And that's only because of my relationship with God. It's only because I got to come here and people loved me. That's another thing. You know, I often share about that. You know, people always like, oh, the 12 steps, you know, you got to do 12 steps. I got to be honest, when I was coming back out of relapses, I did not come back to the rooms because the 12 steps were on the wall. I came back to the rooms because people loved me here. I came back to the rooms because people were kind to me, because they immediately accepted me. And I always think of that. Like, when somebody comes into this room, no matter how many times they come into this room, no matter what you might think about them, this is not high school, this isn't like milkshakes, this is like life or death. Like, seriously, like it is life or death. And like, it's my job to make sure that it is all inclusive and all welcoming. Because the people who shut me out when I was on relapses really made me think I would want to come back here. But those people that I would be like, they'd call me up and they'd be like, do you want to come and hang out? I'd be like, I'm not in your stupid club. I'm getting high. And they'd be like, you can still come. Those people saved my life, you know? And I always want to be on that front line. And I can't even imagine where my life would be if those people didn't continue to love me when I was out there. I don't think I would have made it back. But I'm just super grateful to be here and happy to be in Saratoga. Thanks.